I know it's a cold morning here in Virginia right now. Um, for our Weatherization Network monthly meeting, we are here for our February meeting. And today we will go over an organizational update, some key program updates, grant management plan recap, monitoring updates for the financial administrative side, grant agreements and amendments, spending production updates, bill milestones update, and bill 7 process. And then the next meeting and WDR program updates. Next slide. Tim, are you?
Yep, I'm here. If I remind everyone to please mute your microphones, unless you're asking a question. So first, I'm happy to say congratulations to Michelle Tilton, who is our new Weatherization Program Manager. It's been, I know, quite some time. It was actually a really competitive process and something that's well-deserved for someone who's been dedicated to the program for 12 years. So here's our updated organization chart, you can see. And, these are a mix of function and official titles or unofficial titles. But again, reporting to Michelle is Jennifer McCoy, who leads our financial administrative monitoring, Jen Bissett for policy and planning, and Nicole Branch, who is covering multifamily, Davis-Bacon compliance, purchasing, and inventory for subgrantees, as well as us. And then David Caldwell is our technical services manager, and he leads a team of technical technical monitors. And one thing we've added is Jose Grivet, one of our technical monitors, has agreed to take on a role just as kind of a training coordinator, ensuring that our Hancock credentials are up to date across the network, and also monitoring some of our TNTA investments along those lines. So once again, congratulations to Michelle. Next slide. Okay, I'm going to continue with some key program updates. I know there's a lot of federal policy uncertainty. I'm just going to lay out some facts here. While a lot of discourse surrounds the new administration, we're also monitoring the Congress and this pending expiration of the continuing resolution on the 14th. There is legislation in circulation, and the budget reflects reductions in spending. That's pretty clear across the board. How it rebalances within our funding sources for weatherization is completely unclear. But as of now, we are proceeding as normal. 4 invoices in Hancock marked as approved on January 29th and February 5th. The status of the draws in Page, that's the system we interface with, and at DOE have not yet posted. And we kind of break down where those draw requests are for which grant agreement below. DOE has up to 30 days for approvals. We're at days 21 on the January 29th draws and 14 on the February 5th draws. Historically, those draws have been much quicker turnaround, but they have 30 days. So we are monitoring these draws, the payments. We'll update the network as we approach 30 days. Look, we'll be transparent about our process with DOE. Nobody knows when or how this uncertain period will end. But personally, I remain optimistic. Weatherization is a nearly 50-year-old affordable housing program, has shared bipartisan support throughout its history. And, I'm optimistic we'll have weatherization in the future. So before I turn over to Jen, please stay optimistic. For our part, we're proceeding as normal, and we'll continue to monitor and be transparent with all of you with our status with DOE. So, okay. Jen?
Thanks, Tim. I just want to go over a little bit about the grant management plan that was required to be submitted in CAMS last Thursday, February 13th. This was a really great year. Everybody submitted on time this year, which is the first time that's happened since I've started doing it. So I really want to thank everyone and congratulate you all on being able to get this in. I know that sometimes it's a kind of a pain to have to do this administrative work, but it is necessary as part of DOE regulations that we have to do this every year in order to be able to issue grant agreements. So thanks everyone for doing it. I do want to, you can kind of see here I laid out what the 100-point scale is. I think some people had questions about how it works. This has been in place since before me, since before I started working on this. This was what I inherited and what we use. One of the ways to lose points is to don't submit the correct attachments, or you put something in the wrong place, or it's not signed, or it's last year's, or that is a way to lose points, or if it's late. So if your plan is every day that it was late, it was going to be a 5-point deduction. But nobody submitted late. Passing score is a 70 in order to be able to receive a grant agreement. But 10 out of 14 of you scored a 100 points out of 100, which is great. The lowest score was 80, which is a huge improvement. Last year, we had several people at 70 for lateness and other reasons. And so I think that you all deserve a big round of, applaud yourself. Congratulations on doing an excellent job on the grant management plan. Thank you so much for making it easy for me to review, because they were all so good. So thank you. Next slide, please. So then I did want to talk about the optional budget categories, because this was something that was new in the grant management plan and is new to us in general. And so, as a reminder, our 3 new categories are the audit, client intake, and QCI. I did learn something very useful at the NASCAS conference. We broke out into all the different states. We have like a big meeting. Brian, I see your question. I'll get to in just a second. We had a big meeting with all of our state members where we discussed this. A lot of the April 1 first had already submitted their state plan, so they were very insightful on how they decided to utilize these. One thing that a lot of the states are using for audit and QCI, for example, is they looked at the invoices they were receiving and what the cost breakout was for the audit and QCI, and then they used that and multiplied it by the amount of production that each subgrantee was supposed to produce, and that's how much they allocated for the audit and QCI. Client intake was a little more varied. People had a lot of different theories on how to apply the client intake into their budgets. I think it was great. Almost all of you guys decided to utilize them. 2 agencies did not utilize them in their budget, but DHCD has decided that we will be implementing these budget categories because we have historically had some ACPU issues, and we really want to try to relieve that burden on all of our agencies. And so even though you may not have submitted for it, we'll likely be assigning you some funding into those budget categories. This was really a way the DOE was trying to help us with the ACPU without having to change the statutes. This is what they were able to do, was create more budget categories that allowed us to take the pressure off the program ops budget. And so we think that this would be helpful all across the board for everybody. I would love to know from individual agencies, if you're able to contribute, like, how did you decide what you were going to put in? Because they were quite varied. It looks like to me when I was reviewing it, some of you did kind of like, oh, our audit was 500. Let's multiply by how many jobs we did last year, and this is the amount we are asking for. Some looks like it was percentage of salary, or sometimes all salary. So I'm just, does anybody want to share what their thought process was? Because it's really helpful and informative to me. While y'all are thinking about that, yes, the timing of so Brian, your question, the timing of the GMP was different than last year. So yeah, the goal is to try to submit early this year. My goal is always to submit early, but this year I mean it. Because we had those new budget categories, I really wanted to get the GMP in early, and so that we had time to assess what you guys were thinking about for these new budget categories in order to inform the budget that we submit in the state plan. And so that's why it's early. Ideally, this is what I would like to do every year, is do this in the beginning, earlier in the process. Also, after we have the budget finalized for the state, and we make all of the updates that we need to do in the master file, and the annual plan and all of that, we'll have another network meeting to go over it before it's submitted. So I just wanted to put that out there. It'll likely be in March, towards the end of March. That's my goal. Could be in April. Let's see if we can get it in March. But hopefully that answers your question. How do you find out which agency score? You should be able to see your scores on your grant management plan. But if you can't see it, let me know and I'll email you and tell you what your score is, Sandra. But you should be able to see it. At least from my view in CAMS, it looks like you are able to see it. PCCA calculated according to percent of salary versus production amount. That's helpful. Thanks, John. Anybody else want to share? Oh, Megan, you said you're going to send me an email?
Yeah,
or,
CHP basically did the same. I did the same type thing. It was a percentage of the salary based on our, what percentage of DOE production compared to light heat production. Just looking at salaries and did a percentage of that.
Yeah, I definitely see how that could be. You already probably split your auditor salary out across the grants, and so you could just take that percentage and apply it. So I definitely see how that could be one way to go about it. Anybody else? There's a question for you, Tim, from Mark in the chat. I don't know if you want to jump in here.
Clinch did also mention that they use the amount by the jobs they pay for their QCI.
Okay. The amount. So you use the what you invoice for the jobs and multiplied it by your production. Is that what you're saying, Michelle?
Yes, I think I garbled that up. Sandra said that they did the jobs by the amount they pay for QCIs. Is how they did.
So yeah, so some of you did multiply the dollar amount by the jobs. Okay. That's helpful to be informed. We haven't decided yet at DHCD if we're going to go with here's your production amount, and based on what we're seeing, people are invoicing their auditors invoicing the audit for $500. That's just to make that up, and just multiply that and be like, here's how much for that. Or if we're going to use your individual numbers for percent of salary. So when we make that decision, we'll let you know. We're still, because it did seem like people did it different ways. And so we want to just examine it and analyze it a little bit more. They may have any other questions for me or want to share any more about the new budget categories or the state plan.
Hey, Jen, this is John O'Donnell.
Hey, John.
I think some of the variation you also see is whether people have in-house staff that have salary or they're contracted out. So that also will probably play into part of it. I don't know that anyone commented on that for you.
No, but that is helpful, and it is something that I was thinking about when I was looking at them, because like I said, it was very varied. Some people had a very low amount, some people had a very high amount, and so I appreciate knowing what everybody's thought process was, so that we can make the best decision for moving forward when we're allocating funding. And yeah, I know if you're using a contractor, you pay them a flat rate, and it's just that's it, and you're multiplying production. But if you've got in-house, it probably makes sense to just use your percentage that you use towards their salary, towards the for how you split it amongst the grants. If nobody else has any questions for me or comments, I just wanted to thank you again. This was probably the best GMP period I've seen, and some of the best submissions I've seen since I've been doing this. And I appreciate that the time and energy and thought process it takes to complete these. And again, I know it's kind of tedious. And so I think that you all deserve a round of applause for yourself for really killing it this year. And if you can't see your score, email me and I'll email it to you. But our lowest score was 80, which was fine. That's great. Last year we had several people at the 70 mark. And so this was a huge improvement. And I think that everybody did a great job. So I just really want to thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I know we have a full agenda today. I just wanted to take a few minutes to keep everyone updated on the ongoing monitoring process. As you know, the CAMS documents are available to be uploaded, and they are due on February 21st, which is this Friday. Once everyone has those documents uploaded, I will begin the desk reviews, and I'm projected to do that. I'm actually starting this week. So as far as the on-site visit schedule, they will begin probably in late March through the end of June. So once those desk reviews have been completed, I will be in contact with you with any follow-up questions related to the documentation that was provided, and then also to schedule that on-site visit. And just as a reminder, just like the previous year, I will be reviewing that supported financial documentation in the client files on site. And I just urge everyone to please have both items prepared and ready for review when we arrive on site. I recommend not to wait till the last minute to gather these items. And then once the initial on-site visit has been completed, I will be in touch if there are any actionable items to schedule either on-site or virtual follow-up visits. And then also, seeing as I'd like to conclude the visits in June, it'll also give me a chance to possibly schedule any other virtual or on-site visits as needed for any other type of training or assistance that I can provide. Next slide. And then I'm a visual person, so the next step in the monitoring process, once the documents are uploaded in CAMS, those of you who are doing this process, toward the bottom in the financial section, I ask that you upload various detailed expenses. From those detailed expenses, we will be selecting some random expenses that we'd like to see some supporting documentation. And I will provide the highlighted selected expenses in CAMS. And once that is done, I will let you know that it is available. And from those highlighted expenses, those supported documentation, that is what I will be reviewing on site. And so in CAMS, again, where you found the monitoring documents, you will also find the selected expenses under project management, under the report and documents tab. And of course, if you are still having difficulties locating it, please reach out to me and I can walk you through the process. And that's it for me.
Okay, and as an update for our grant agreements and amendments, for Bill, your grant agreements are going to end March 31st, and there will be 1-year extensions granted based on satisfactory performance. And funds may be reallocated for lagging production in order for us to keep production moving forward to meet those milestones to receive the remaining 50%. For program year 22 and 23, WRF and DOE annual formula funds, amendments for subgrantees with invoices imminently ready to be submitted are being uploaded into CAMS today. I will reach out to those agencies. You should be aware that you have one coming to you, but I will make you aware when it's uploaded into CAMS for your signature. Once we have that fully signed amendment, then we can grant you access to the funds in Hancock. And for everyone right now has access to their Readiness 24 funds. If more WRF funds are needed, please reach out. Virginia likely is going to be returning some of our Readiness funds to DOE, but we would like to minimize that as much as possible. And it looks like, Stephanie, you had a question. We do not have an exact timeline for the bill right now. But we will be closely monitoring that. And then for the updates that we provide each month for the ACPU, the health and safety, their spending balances and production count. To give you an update of where we are for our ACPUs as of the end of last week and compared to what the allowable limits are. You can see for program year 22, and 23 and even 24 right now, we're within the limits, and some are well within the limits. LIHEAP 24 and Bill, we are elevated. Bill, we definitely do need to be bringing that down. It is closely being watched. But for LIHEAP, we do have some flexibility, but again, we do need to start bringing that down, but we do have some flexibility there compared to our Department of Energy funds. And at the bottom, you'll also have the breakdown of how you calculate your average cost per unit for LIHEAP versus DOE. And then for our network health and safety percentages, right now we are at 10.62% for DOE 22, 13.72% for DOE 23. So we're almost at that max 15% level. For DOE 24, we're at 4.33%. LIHEAP, we're at 5.81%. And that's where we're going to have that flexibility if you do need additional health and safety funds, but we don't have the flexibility at that time with our annual formula funds for DOE. You can request to move some of your funds into health and safety for LIHEAP because we do have that as an exception in that state plan. And then our bill health and safety currently is at 6.7%. And this is based on the amount that's been invoiced within health and safety compared to the amount currently awarded in program operations. And for DOE 22, we are wrapping this up. So we should be having this not showing as much shortly. For 22 readiness funds, we've spent about 54%. We do have some funds that are being reallocated within these funds to hopefully spend out the readiness 22 funds. But we have a few that have remaining invoices to go through. For DOE 23, we are right about closing out for this one as well, which is great, and we still are within that allowable ACPU limit. Then for our 23 readiness funds, we are in the process of reallocating those funds. You do not have access to them if you're one, as I stated earlier, that has an invoice that's imminently ready to be submitted. You're going to have that amendment so that you can submit the invoice in. But otherwise, you should be filling out a reduction form for us. So if you have not, we will be reaching out to you to request that. And then for DOE 24, we're at 30%. We have a ways to go still, so we just really need to be mindful on closing out our DOE 24 grant. The invoices are going to be due, I think it's that first week of June, so production really by the end of May. And then for our DOE 24 readiness funds, we are only at about 6% or 6.5%. So we still have a ways to go. But again, everyone has access to these funds, and we want to minimize as little as we can what goes back. And ideally, you would want to have probably your jobs completed for the readiness by the end of March or beginning of April in order for it to result in a DOE or bill completion. You may be able to have things go through faster than that, but realistically, that would probably be the best goal to go with. And then LIHEAP, we're at about 37%. And for bill, we're at 58%. And then as an update of where we are with our milestones, and Bill 1, which is the program notice from DOE, they outline all the milestones that need to be met. The one that is one of the two that's most crucial from your standpoint as a subgrantee would be the production for Bill, as well as production for DOE and monitoring purposes. For bill production, we have to have 30% of our goal And right now we're at about 19%. We have 907 units that have been on approved invoices. So we're getting closer, but we still have a little bit more to meet there. But also another benchmark is for our monitoring to be completed. And we need weatherize and invoice homes by June to monitor. And currently we do have 3 sub-grantees that have not met the minimum number of DOE homes for us to be able to monitor them. And then our next monthly WAP meeting is going to be scheduled for Wednesday, March 19th at 9 a.m. And a meeting invite was sent out on February 7th. If you did not receive that or you need it resent, you can reach out to us. And we did want to ask before it goes over for WDR updates, for those that attended the VACAP conference, if you had any feedback or further clarification that you wanted to ask from while you were there. So Chase, it looks like you have a question. Do all WAP sub-grantees need to meet those bill production targets for DHCD to initiate any bill monitoring visits? We do have to be able to monitor them. So from my understanding, there are some benchmarks that are more geared toward the grantee side, but we do need that production to be able to monitor. But we would need to monitor all sub-grantees.
Well, and I'd like to point out too, we need to monitor for DOE funding as well. And that's where, unfortunately we came up short last year. So because production did not allow us to complete monitoring in time to sort of meet that milestone.
If there are no additional questions there, I will pass it along to Aaron.
Hello, my name is Aaron Shoemaker. I'm the Housing Program Administrator assigned to the Weatherization Deferral Repair Program at DHCD. We call it WDR for short. I will provide you with updates to WDR over the next few slides. All right, I was going to say next slide, please, but you're already here. For the Weatherization Deferral Repair Program, WDR, the big ticket item is the WDR Program Manual. We emailed out the final draft of the WDR program manual to the network in January and initiated a 30-day comment period. The 30-day comment period allowed for DHCD to formally receive questions, comments, suggestions, and general feedback on the WDR program manual. Thank you very much for the questions, comments, suggestions, and general feedback we got. It is very helpful as always. And we do this process every 6 months, and every 6 months we include an appendix in the WDR program manual where we, to the best of our ability, summarize and respond to the questions that we received. The comment period ended February 14th, 2025, which was this past Friday, and we received a lot of great feedback. However, we received the majority of it from the tag group as well as individual sub-grantees on the 13th and the 14th. And it's a significant volume that we will need to take some time to parse out and respond to. So the original final release date was February 21st, which is this coming Friday. As a heads up, we will likely need to push back this date as we want to make sure that we adequately respond to the feedback that we received. Again, thank you very much for all the comments, questions, feedback, and suggestions that we got. We will use it to not only respond to in the previously mentioned appendix, but we will also use it to make general improvements and clarification to the language in the document itself. So stay tuned for the new release date that we will have, assuming that we don't make this Friday, for the release of the WDR program manual final document. I will, as is always the case, send out an email to the network that contains the final document as well as the updated forms as applicable. And we will be updating 2 of the forms, as well as the updated remittance cover sheet, which we assume we will be updating based on some of the changes that we proposed. And then we will post all of these updated forms on the WDR webpage, as is previously also the case. Whenever I send out this email, it's a good opportunity to inform me if there is somebody in the network, especially with your agency, that has been omitted from the contact list that I use. So I just want to remind you to please give me some updated contact information. It's very helpful to do so. And we do not wish to exclude anybody from receiving this valuable information. So with that, again, I thank you for a third time for the questions, comments, suggestions, and feedback that we got. And I look forward to communicating out that final document to you. The remainder of my slides are for the WDR scorecard, and I would like for the next slide to be on the thing, please. Thank you. So the next several slides are data. We will not be going over them line by line during this presentation. However, as is the case each month, we will be sending out the slides at a later time. So if you're interested in looking at this data more intently, I encourage you to do so once we send out those slides. However, I'd be happy to answer any questions about this data. This first slide is of the contract that we initiated July 1, 2021, and we have extended it several times, including the final extension, which is to June 30th, 2025. We initially had 17 grant agreements that went out. However, we had 2 grantees who, before spending any of the money, dropped out of participation in the WDR and weatherization assistance programs. Telamon was one that spent funding, so they are included in this graph, and that is why they, or chart, and that is why they are highlighted in a darker, whatever that is, I'm colorblind. Next slide, please. I think it's gray. This is the contract that was initiated July 1, 2022. And as was the case with the previous chart, we initiated this with the grantees who were still sub-grantees at this point, and that was the 14 you see on here. And we have similarly extended this grant to June 30th, 2025. Next slide, please. And this is the third one-year contract that we initiated July 1, 2023, and we have similarly extended it to June 30th, 2025. I'll make a note about this as well as the previous slide. You'll see that there are blanks next to some of the sub-grantees. The reason this is because those sub-grantees initially received a grant agreement with funding. However, we do not wish to have multiple contracts with agencies that have not had their funding spent. So what we did is, next slide, please, roll that funding into the current 2-year grant agreements that were initiated July 1, 2024 and extend through June 30th, 2026 in the amounts that you see in this chart. And as you can see, 4 sub-grantees have begun spending out this funding. couple of them have also gone beyond just starting and are getting to the point they will need additional funds should those be available. And we will let you know if that is the case. But please reach out if you need additional funds for this program and let us know what your need is so we can take that under consideration when the June 30th deadline hits for the currently extended WDR grant agreements of the past 3 slides. Next slide. This is the slide that has the biggest update compared to the previous presentations we have done on this data. And that is because we have added a new calendar year, 2025, because we have data on it. So these numbers are based on remittance stats. It's important to realize that because the remittances often include both housing repairs, which is the dollar figure for the money that goes out to the crews and subcontractors that are doing the WDR work, as well as it includes administrative dollars attached to that remittance. The first chart on the top left shows the total number of single-family homes served, as well as the multifamily units served as well. And you can see that the total homes served is just about to be about 2,000. So that's fantastic that we have helped about 2,000 households with the WDR program. The top right chart, which I'm realizing is a different color. I can see it on this screen, but not the other one. That's not important, but it includes the average project cost, again, with the aforementioned admin dollars rolled into that figure. It would be nice at a later date if we could parse that out, but for now, this is the data that we have to work with. But it does give a pretty good estimation of what the overall price is for jobs for single-family homes on average by calendar year, as well as the multifamily unit cost. And then the third and final chart on this slide at the bottom has a breakout of the cost categories. And we've seen a similar trend for all 5 years. Again, those are calendar years, just to make sure that we're not confusing with fiscal years or grant agreement years. And the trend is that the number 1 and number 2 are HVAC repairs and roof. The HVAC repairs category includes both the crossover as well as the fuel switching that we have listed out on the WDR initial setup report. Those 2 categories are followed by structural and electrical, as well as plumbing, and then other, as well as hazardous material removal. Maybe one day it would be nice if we could parse out the other category to see what is included in those more specifically. As you can see, other has increased over the years, and I think that's simply because the program has become clearer about flexibility and cost repairs that are allowable in the other category, such as the siding repairs that were specifically included in the WDR program manual and a previous update. With that, thank you for reviewing this data with me. And again, I'd be happy to answer any questions about the data or anything related to WDR.
Thank you, everyone. We finished a little earlier today than we normally do, but if you have any questions, we have a little bit of time, we can answer some, or if you wanted to have some discussion.
Yeah, Mark mentioned topic of advances, and at present we are, as you said, revising an operations manual that translates into some of our annual plan, and we're targeting that for the next year in our annual plan, but nothing imminent in the few months remaining for DOE. So.
Michelle, this is John O'Donnell. So it looked like we were at 19% on bill production. Could you clarify what, again, we need to hit 30% of that production? And can you just clarify also how that ties back to the DOE monitoring, and if there needs to be at least one unit of bill by everybody, or is that just 30% by the network collectively?
So from my
Thank you.
understanding, thank you, John, for the question. From my understanding, the 30% is network wide. So it wouldn't be 30% of each individual subgrantee allocation. It would be of the overall amount. So right now we're at 907 units, but we would need 1,442. So we still have a little around 500 remaining. And then on that screen that we shared, it showed some of the benchmarks, but not all. But one of them is that we have to monitor each agency, but to be able to monitor and meet our monitoring needs based on the percentages that have to be monitored, we have to have the production there. So we would need that for both DOE and Bill for DOE to consider it that we've met the benchmarks.
Yeah, and for bill monitoring, that's an ongoing process. That's just, yeah. So we just need to keep that up. But for DOE, it's more time bound.
It looked like Bill Beachy had a question, and then maybe Stephen was next.
Yeah, are you actually hearing anything from DOE in response to the invoices or meeting goals for compliance and so forth? No, so you're not, okay. That was it.
Correspondence from them, yeah.
Okay. All right, thanks.
And Stephen, you had, I think we're next, it looks like.
Okay, thanks, Michelle. Yeah, I know there was possibly in that draft. I can't remember exactly. I don't have it in front of me. We got a snow day today. We got some snow here and bad weather, but so there was talk about wanting inspectors from localities to send emails and letters about permits. So talk a little more about that. Where are we at with that? So if, I guess it wasn't real specific. So if we go out there and, we're going to do some WDR work, or we're going to have to, get the inspector to send a letter or an email if we're doing a little bit of plumbing, if we're doing a little bit of electrical, they've got to send letters or emails saying no permit is required.
And this sounds like it was related to the WDR manual, is
WDR.
that correct?
Yeah.
Yes.
In the past, Stephen, we've gotten messages on contractors' invoices saying no permit is required from the authority having jurisdiction and no additional documentation. So if you have a remittance and if that kind of statement shows up, just have some kind of backup information verifying who was talked to, what authority of jurisdiction, because sometimes it's been inconsistent with documentation that's been received in the remittances. Does that help?
Well, I mean, what what measure are we talking about? I mean, are we talking about every measure, or are we talking about certain things, or?
Well, we've gotten the remittances saying that a fuel switch or gas appliance didn't require a permit. We've had a varied amount of documentation indicated on remittances saying no permit was required for a gas appliance. No permit was required for when you're switching out, different types of appliance from like a heat pump and you're going to sometimes a gas appliance. So, it varies, a gas water heater, I'm sorry. So just indicate if upfront would be helpful upfront to reach out to authority having jurisdiction. Some authorities have jurisdictions differences based on if structural pieces would go in on the roof. So it's just, a lot of it came from notes being on the remittance saying that there was nothing required and it was an inconsistency. But you can reach out after our meeting for some additional, more detail if you have some particular questions about particular remittance.
Okay, thank you, Jen.
And yet, I would say in terms of the scope of what measures are included, you know, assuming that many of your staff who have been working with WDR, just contractors in general for a while, have probably already been reaching out to the municipalities to see what is required. So continue to do so for the measures that you're doing that with.
For sure.
Thank you for the question. We haven't completely resolved that in the WDR manual update. So, you know, but your concern is noted. You know, where does the scope end? You know, for that type of that request. So.
Thank you.
And Aubrey, it looked like you were next for the questions. And Aubrey, if you're trying to say something, you're muted. Now looks like.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, Stephen beat me to the punch on this permit deal, but I do have a couple of questions and comments. Like in my case, I deal with 4 different jurisdictions. And we all know sometimes the building permit office, they can bend over backwards to help you. And then you go in there tomorrow and they won't give you the time of day. And my biggest question is, if I'm doing a WDR job and the contractor, you know, has got to repair a leaking faucet, and I go to the building permit office to see if I need a permit, and they laugh at me and say no, and I say, well, give me an email that says that, and, you know, if they refuse, what do we do? And the problem is we're going to have contractors, you know, sitting there doing nothing, waiting on action from the building permit office. And, you know, and everybody knows some jobs or measures you need a permit and some you don't need a permit. And some, it depends on what day of the week you go by the office to get a reading on whether or not you need a permit. I've, you know, had that happen to me personally, not in WDR weatherization, but on, you know, other jobs that, you know, I've done in years past. And I never will forget, pardon the language, but the building office told me, they said, just build the damn thing. And because nobody in zoning or building could come to an agreement. And, you know, if we have to get a permit or get a statement saying we don't need a permit for every little thing we do in WDR, it's going to create more of a backlog than we have now. I mean, it's just going to slow production down.
Well, thank you, Aubrey, for the comment. Again, you know, you're certainly echoing what Stephen said, which is, you know, where does it, you know, on our end, of course, we want to ensure that contractors are actually asking. Be nice if we had some assurance that the question's been asked whether a permit's required or not, because that's really the verification that we're after. But at the same time, we recognize, you know, there needs to be some boundary on you know, the extent to which this, you know, this is being requested. Thank you.
I think Mark, you had a question, looks like.
Yeah, same one from the chat. So obviously, and again, thanks Tim, Michelle, and everyone else at DHCD. I know these are challenging and trying times because there's so much lack of information And, thanks to Tim, because I keep beating him up all the time with questions. So, obviously we have huge concerns as an agency. I've talked to other agencies, different ones have different feelings, around what's going on. Megan and her team did some research for me, and on average last year for each of the different funding sources, Bill, LIHEAP, and DOE, the average turnaround time from when DHCD approves the invoice, not when we submit it, to the time it's paid is 7 days. LIHEAP, it was great, just turned around within, I think, 5 or 6 days for payment this time. Right now, I think the DOE invoice since the approval, again, I appreciate you sharing that information, Tim. We're now at 3 weeks for our invoice. So that's 2 weeks past the usual time frame. Bill, we're at 2 weeks. Usually the average is 7 days. The worst we've seen is 7 or 8 days for payments in the past. So we have real concerns because obviously, and that's the reason I asked about advances also. I know, Tim, you and I've talked about those last year, but we outlay, like a lot of agencies, a lot of dollars in expenses that, we're hoping for repayment in a reasonable amount of time. Understand we still have a few days left for some of those and a week or so on others. If we don't see those within those 30 days, obviously, we've had a lot of folks who have said, hey, I'm going to reach out to my congressional leaders. That's fine. But I also want to find out who we can reach out to at Secretary Merrick's office, who is the appropriate contact for us as an agency. Because I know you guys are doing everything you can. It's silence from the federal administration and also from the governor's office. Because, I know, DHCD only has so much leverage with DOE, probably not a lot, as a governor of the Commonwealth, who has folks that are impacted, businesses that are impacted, because this is trickle down. This is not just obviously the agencies, the employees, but also contractors. So we need to make sure that, we have that information on who we can contact if we go past this 30 days, because 30 days is just a mark. And I don't want to wait and we get to 31 days and 35 days and 40 days and 50 days. So I want to make sure we're as proactive as possible, but also give the appropriate amount of time. So is that something you guys can provide for us today? Not in this meeting, but by the end of the day? You're on mute. You're on mute, Tim.
I'm certainly not in the business of advocating going up over our agency's head to do that. I would say that information, I would imagine, is publicly available.
Okay, so DHCD does not want to provide any information or contact information at the Secretary's office?
I believe the Secretary's office information for how to reach out is publicly available.
Okay, so you guys don't know who is in charge of DHCD at Secretary Merrick's office, it sounds like?
I would say Secretary Merrick is in charge of DHCD. So.
Okay, all right. I just want to check. I mean,
yeah,
that's fine. I figured you guys would know who oversees DHCD and can provide that, but that's okay. I'll reach out to Merrick's office. So, thanks.
Bill, it looks like you have a question as well.
Had a question, just going back to the permit concerns or difficulties. A thought that occurred to me process wise is, and I think Jen's been good about this in the past, is perhaps on the front end in the setup report, if it looks like there's something in there that to your understanding would require a permit, go ahead and include that in a reminder to folks so that they can be working on that then. And I realize stuff comes up in the course of working on a project, but if there's something on the front end that you're approving a repair that looks to you like it would require a permit, go ahead and a friendly reminder so that can go ahead and start asking that question of the authority having jurisdiction then. And if for whatever reason not having any luck with that, then, ultimately, unfortunately, may have to defer the job. if it can't satisfy you all on the back end, and we know that on the front end, then maybe the appropriate step will be just to go ahead and defer it.
Yeah. Like I said, I think if Jen's been doing that, communicating, I wouldn't expect a change in how we're doing this in the future. So, we're still finalizing. I mean, Aaron, I think, was optimistic and saying Friday we'd be able to turn around the turn around the final document. So, thank you, Bill.
Eric, it looks like you had a question.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank Tim and DHCD, Michelle. Congrats, Michelle, on the new role for this call. I think it's really helpful to have this information exchange. And I just, from a perspective, I've been on a lot of national calls with other, state community action groups who Weatherization is central, like for us as well. And I definitely I do want to commend DHCD and the Secretary's office for continuing to push to keep the funding flowing as you have, and to give information like you have, because there's other states who have kind of just shut down the funds and shut down the process in the uncertainty, and you all have continued to push. I get your concerns, Mark, about the payment timeline and everything, but I think we're lucky that like DHCD is working to try to get that reimbursed from the feds, and definitely my take on the best approach at the moment is to try to for this is more not to DHCD but for us as and all the weatherization providers and associations, is just to keep working through our congressional offices. And so definitely alert us here at VACAP and Chase as well at AECP. I'm keeping a running list of all of our federal programs that haven't gotten reimbursed, and this governor's office has been, I think, helpful in trying to get things repaid. And so just I recommend we do it through the association. Chase and I can talk, and happy to talk, Mark. But I definitely caution raising concerns and how we do it with the Secretariat as I think they've been an ally on that. And again, just alert us as associations so we can keep information, just the information flowing, and do it in a way that we have had several programs get funding unlocked as we've worked through our national association on alerting folks at the federal level. So I'm optimistic too about that, and appreciate you, DHC, for keep letting us know, like on calls like this, where things stand, and you've been transparent about it. So I appreciate that.
Can add that NASCASP has sent to its grantees a survey on what the status is of our funding and draws and all these questions, and we will be responding to that. So it's due on Friday.
Well, thank you everyone for that joined in the discussion. We really appreciate your time, and we will see you next month.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you,
Black
everyone.
History is
Bye.
American
Thank
history.
you.
Black History is American history. Bye-bye, everybody.